But we begin tonight with the opposition to new rules for Wall Street falling apart. After starting out with a full frontal assault on Wall Street reform and a sustained public campaign against it and a promise that every single Republican would stand united to kill it, today the top Republican in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, climbed down.
With regard to financial regulation, it's pretty clear now, and the majority leaders indicated to me, that serious discussions have resumed. We are all optimistic that this can be fixed.
That is a far cry from the "we will kill it at any cost" message that we were hearing from Senator McConnell before today.
That is clearly not the direction the American people would like for us to go, and also not the direction Senate Republicans would like to go. Never again should taxpayers be expected to bail out Wall Street from its own mistakes.
That was the top Republican in the Senate last week. So what explains why he's done a 180 now? See if you can spot Mitch McConnell's problem here. The first man you will see in this next clip is Mitch McConnell. The second man you will see is Bob Corker, another Republican senator. Watch.
It will lead to endless taxpayer bailouts of Wall Street banks.
This fund that's been set up is anything but a bailout.
Hard to maintain the talking point that Wall Street reform is a big bailout when your own party's point man on the issue keeps saying that's not true. Senator Corker today making it crystal clear. He told the newspaper Roll Call, quote, "The things that we've been saying on our side of the aisle about bailouts and all that, they missed the point." So Republicans in the Senate trying to stop Wall Street reform face planted on their own talking point there. Bummer. Over in the House, Republicans today started off still trying to make that talking point work. House Minority Leader John Boehner blasting out an email warning that Wall Street reform would, quote, "empower the federal government to provide Wall Street with permanent bailouts," courtesy of American taxpayers. The Huffington Post's Sam Stein reporting today that even if Democrats were to take out the part of the bill that some Republicans have been saying would amount to a bailout, John Boehner admits he would still call it a bailout anyway. So the bill outlaws bailouts. It does not allow them. And if it was changed anyway to take out the part that some Republicans say is a bailout, even though it's not, they admit they would call it a bailout anyway. They admit this. So, like, okay, here's a shark. Here's John Boehner. Ooh. Right? Jumping the shark. Also, here's a whale. This has nothing to do with the metaphor, but it's awesome. Sorry. Okay. Then there's Republican Senator Scott Brown of Massachusetts. You know, Senator 41, the senator who's going to save the day for Republicans. Republicans in the Senate lost their main talking point against Wall Street reform. Republicans in the House were caught bragging about not meaning what they say about Wall Street reform. But perhaps this new guy will lead the way, put a telegenic, likable, credible Republican face on this awkward siding with the Wall Street banks thing. That's not working out either. First, you will recall Senator Brown mystified everyone by asking a reporter from the Boston Globe why he should oppose Wall Street reform. Quoting from the Globe, when asked what areas he thought should be fixed, Senator Brown replied, "Well, what areas do you think should be fixed? I mean, you know, tell me, and then I'll get a team and go fix it." A few days later, the senator made his Sunday show debut and explained his opposition to Wall Street reform this way on camera.
The bill that's being proposed by the banking chairman dramatically affects businesses, for example, Liberty Mutual, Mass Mutual. These folks are caught in that regulation as well. It's going to cost potentially 25,000 to 35,000 jobs. And
well, now wait a minute, Senator. How can you say that?
Well, I can say it very clearly because the regulations that they're trying to reel in with some of the risky hedging that bets are doing also affects companies like I just described in Massachusetts. It's very clear.
It's very clear. It is very clear that this bill will cost 25,000 to 35,000 jobs in Massachusetts. Nearly a fifth of all financial industry-related jobs in Massachusetts will go away if this bill passes. To echo Mr. Schieffer here, wait a minute, Senator, how can you say that? What is it based on? When pressed by the Boston Globe to produce any basis for those rather shocking numbers, Senator Brown manned up and said, "I stand by them, and there will be larger numbers nationally." His staffers then cited a study done by a group called the Business Roundtable. The problem, as the Globe points out, that Business Roundtable study, quote, did not provide any Massachusetts-specific figures. So again, where's the basis for this 25,000 to 35,000 jobs are going to be lost in Massachusetts claim? Senator Brown then told the Globe that the number was based on, quote, my speaking with the industry leaders over the last month or so. His office elaborated that he got this estimate from the chief executive of one of the companies he mentioned on TV, MassMutual, which is headquartered in Springfield, Massachusetts. Except that MassMutual told the Globe that the company didn't give Senator Brown any projected job losses associated with the bill. What they gave him was their estimate of how many jobs were lost in the Massachusetts financial sector to the recession. They told him that was about 33,000 jobs. And even that totally unrelated number, it turns out was, and again quoting from the Globe, dramatically inflated, the company acknowledged. Nonetheless, MassMutual telling Scott Brown erroneously that 33,000 jobs were lost to the recession somehow turned into this.
The bill that's being proposed by the banking chairman dramatically affects businesses, for example, Liberty Mutual, MassMutual. These folks are caught in that regulation as well. It's going to cost potentially 25,000 to 35,000 jobs.
Just out of thin air. There's a number. I heard that number once about something on national television, just thin air. Scott Brown declares that nearly a fifth of Massachusetts bankers will lose their jobs if Wall Street reform passes. When we asked MassMutual for clarification today, they sent us this statement, which is classic. Quote, we are one of many financial institutions that have discussed the proposed financial regulatory reform bill with Senator Brown. We asked them to clarify and add some detail. That's it. That's all they'd give us. But at least they got back to us. Cannot say the same thing for Senator Brown. We also called his office today for a clarification on his 1/5 of Massachusetts bankers will lose their jobs declaration. They asked what show we were calling from, and then we told them, and then they never called us back. It's not really anything new with them and us. They never, ever call us back about anything, even when they say they're going to. Like a teenager in love, though, we shall wait by the phone patiently, impatiently, whatever. At this point, we're just excited to find out what he's going to make up next. Joining us now is Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation magazine. Chris, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Rachel.
So what happened to the unified Republican opposition to Wall Street reform?
Well, I'm not quite sure it was ever quite as strong as they projected, but I basically think there's two things happening. One is that the politics just aren't very good. I mean, Noam Scheiber in the New Republic has a really good piece about how this reform has actually gotten a little stronger recently. And one of his sources says, compares it to what happened to Sarbanes-Oxley back in the early part of the decade, and when WorldCom came out, it really strengthened the push behind Sarbanes-Oxley because you couldn't say anymore it was a one-off. And they said it was the same with this Goldman Sachs SEC charge, and you're going to see more charges come down the pike. I mean, from everything we know, it looks like Countrywide might be next. There are other firms that might be in the crosshairs of regulators. All of that is reminding people of exactly who the villains are in this drama, and I think that's making the politics much more difficult for the GOP.
But then we did see in the Republican sort of initial pass at this, we saw that their strategy against this was not to say we're siding with the bad guys and hey, they're not that bad. They said this is a what is it? Bailout bill. Yes, it's a bailout bill. Totally disassociated from the facts, but they were willing to go there anyway. That talking point has fallen apart. Do we yet know what the sort of next basis of opposition is going to be, or do you really think this means they're just not going to oppose it?
Well, it'll be really interesting to see. I mean, in that respect, what you just pointed out in the Corker clip you played, Corker's played a really interesting role here because I think, you know, Bob Corker and I have very different views of the future of financial regulatory reform, but he did something that Chuck Grassley did not do during health care reform. Remember, Chuck Grassley was one of the main interlocutors of the Democrats, and at the same time, he was going back to his constituents and essentially reaffirming the death panel lie. What Corker did today was he actually, I think in good faith, said, no, that's not true. That's not the way the bill worked. And doing that, I think, is a fundamental signal of a kind of good faith investment in the policy outcome, which, whether you agree with him on policy or not, is just the threshold needed to actually legislate. That being present, I think, actually makes a difference.
Do you think that means that Bob Corker ends up being a Republican vote for financial reform? Do you see anybody else out there who's a likely pickup, as they say?
Well, look, I mean, it's the same sort of group of people. It's possible it gets enough. I mean, the one thing I would say, just to sort of balance out the good news of Bob Corker acting semi-responsibly, is that progressives should really scratch their heads and wonder, if you can pull a bunch of GOP senators onto this bill, whether the bill is as good as it's being billed. I mean, that should really make you question the actual content of the bill. You wonder if the GOP is able to sort of come on board this bill, if it's going to offer the kind of fundamental change after the biggest crisis in 80 years that's really necessary.
On the issue of Scott Brown, Chris, he's turning out to be a hoot as a senator.
That was Palin-esque. I mean, that was amazing.
You just try to diagram the sentence, and it's like, wow, this is way above my pay grade.